So we're in a series called The Story of God, and we started this. It's kind of, for lack of a better word, it's kind of a mega series. It's kind of a collection of series. So a long time ago, and many of you have even joined us since then, but a long time ago, we started preaching through the early chapters of Genesis. We talked about creation and how God made the world, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah, the Tower of Babel. And then a few months went by, and we picked up the story again with Abraham and Sarah and this promise that God gave them that through him and through them, nations would be blessed. The whole world would be changed. That through this Abraham family, God would redeem all the world from the curse of sin. The problem was Abraham and Sarah couldn't have any kids. Imagine that irony, that God tells them, you're going to have more kids than there is sand on the seashore. And Abraham's like, awesome, sounds good, except I'm 100 years old and don't have any kids. And then through the promise of God, Isaac is born. So now here we're jumping back in, we're picking up the story in Genesis 25. And here where we're at, we talked just last week about the birth of these two boys, Esau and Jacob. So here the generation is moved on. Abraham and Sarah have passed away. And now the family of God is Isaac and Rebekah and their two twin boys. Now these two boys, we talked about this last week. When Rebekah gave birth to these twins, Esau came out, and the name Esau means hairy, literally hairy. He came out of the womb. He had so much hair, they threw their old baby name out the window and named him Harry. That's what happened. I don't know. Maybe they had another name picked out. I don't know. So Esau, they said Esau came out red. We don't know if that's his skin was red or he was a ginger and had red hair. We're not really sure. So Esau comes out. He's basically a baboon, just covered in hair. The next kid comes out, and they name him Jacob, which means heel, because he came grabbing onto the heel of his brother when he came out of the womb. Now, babies, if you've ever had like a newborn, they got a pretty strong grip sometimes. Zachariah, they said when Kelly had to have a C-section with Zachariah, they said when they pulled him out, the umbilical cord was wrapped all around him and he was holding it. They had to like pry it out of his hands. Wild stuff. So these brothers, they're like fighting in the womb. Jacob comes out of the womb grabbing his brother's heel. And so Jacob's name, it means heel grabber, deceiver, supplanter. That Jacob is someone who from the womb is trying to trip someone else up so he can get ahead. So last week we talked about the brothers Harry and Heel. And we see here, as we pick up the story, that what James read, it pretty much checks out. Like they are living up to their names, or maybe down to their names in this story. So we're going to walk through this here, and we're going to see what God has to share with us today. Maybe you hear this and you're like, Joey, what did two brothers fighting about soup have anything to do with my life today? And it turns out quite a lot. So to reread here, first couple verses, it says in verse 27, when the boys grew up, Esau became an expert hunter. Okay, apparently he wasn't that good because he came home hungry. I'm just going to say it, all right? Apparently he thought he was good. An outdoorsman. Any outdoorsmen out there? Any guys? All right, couple guys. But Jacob was a quiet man who stayed at home. Any Jacobs out there? Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for wild game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. All right, so I said this last week, and this is really, really important. Sometimes when you read the Old Testament or when you read the New Testament, we come to the Bible like it's Aesop's fables, right? We're going to see a righteous individual who does a good thing, and we should be like that person, right? The Bible's supposedly God's word for us. Shouldn't we be like the people in the Bible? Listen, you shouldn't be like any of the people in this story. So we'll get to the brothers here in a minute, but it doesn't start with the brothers. It starts with the parents who are messed up, okay? So it says here that the parents are playing favorites. No wonder the boys are fighting. We got Isaac and Rebekah who are picking favorites And the funny thing when you read it, it's not like Esau is just far superior of a human, so we should favor Esau. It's like Isaac loved Esau because he brought him wild game. I have 2 sons. If one of them one day is like, Dad, here's some deer jerky, I'm not going to be like, you are way better than your brother. I mean, it's not that good. Like, it's good, right? But I mean, he literally has a favorite child. Why? Because he hunts and brings him food. So, okay, real mature for Isaac here. And then it says, and Rebekah loved Jacob. Now, we don't get a reason why Rebekah loved Jacob. But here we see, and I want to remind you of this here, this is the entire plan to redeem the world, are these 4 messed up people. We talk about the people of God today. We think about 2 billion plus followers of Jesus. That's where God's people are in the world. If we look in the Old Testament, a little bit later on, we think about this great nation of Israel. They are the people of God. You know who the people of God are this early in the story? Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Esau. And it's not looking good for the story of God. And the hero of the Bible is not all these righteous people who always do it right. It's the God of loyal love who works through dysfunctional families and dysfunctional people. And that's really good news for me. And probably good news for you. So we got dad and mom playing the brothers off each other. And so the story kind of goes on here in verse 29. It says, once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field exhausted. And he said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stuff because I'm exhausted. That is why he was also named Edom. All right, so there's a couple things here that I want you to see. I was doing some studying this week. When he says, let me eat, that word for eat, never in all of Hebrew writing that we have, the entire Bible, other Hebrew literature that's outside the Bible, the word for eat that Esau uses here is never used to describe a human eating. It's always used to describe animals eating. It's like the word gulp down. It's like he was just trying to smash some of this stew. Like he just had to have it right now. The only time, one time, the word is ever used to describe a human eating food is Esau describing how bad he wants Jacob's stew. Okay, so we have Esau here. He's so hairy. He's basically a baboon anyways, okay? He comes in from the field. He's like, I need to smash this stuff right now. And it's funny, the translation here, this translation says red stuff. And I'm like, that's a weird translation, right? Did I just pick a weird one? Or is there other ways to word this here? I always say the best translation is whichever one you read. But I was doing some studying here also on this phrase, and the phrase in Hebrew is literally the red. It doesn't even make any sense. That Esau apparently is so famished, he's so starving, he can't even remember the word for stew. He just says the red. Like, just let me gulp down the red stuff right now. And then the narrator says, that is why he was also named Edom. And Edom means red. So here I see these boys are living up to their birth story. Esau comes out hairy and red. And he's like, give me the red stuff. And the narrator's like, that's why his people are called the Edomites, the red people. It's just wild. Like, when you first read this, you're like, Esau is a man's man. But when you really look at it, it's like, no, he's just an animal. Like, he's just hairy, he wants to smash food, and he just wants the red stuff. It's like he's a shark that smelled blood, and he's like, I have to pounce right now. He's like a vulture that saw a carcass, and he's like, I see the blood, I must eat it. There's no other option. Like, no, yeah, he's hangry, right? Esau's hangry. He's not happy about it, comes in from the field exhausted. So Esau in this story, like Isaac, who's terrible playing favorites, like Rebekah, who's playing favorites, Esau doesn't come off very well in this story. So now here we're going to come to Jacob. So verse 31, Jacob, man, if his brother is just wild about the red stuff, Jacob is just wild about the birthright. Like, it's terrible. Jacob here comes off as messed up as the rest of them. So it says here, Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." Now, I have two brothers. This is something that, like, you can see the smirk in the brother there. Like, oh yeah, I got some of this nice stew here, got some bread, some nice lentil stew. Oh, you want some of it? Okay, first, sell me your birthright. And you can tell here, this is something that, like, he's probably been nagging Esau about for quite a while. You can tell Esau's not like, oh my. Like, he's not that Esau would say, oh my, because he's Esau, right? But, like, he's not surprised. He's not shocked. He knows. And Jacob is like, he's calculating. He's devious. Maybe he planned the whole thing, which makes Jacob look terrible. Or maybe he's just ready to exploit his brother at a moment's notice, in and out of season. Like, Jacob's just ready to steal the birthright at any point. So he says, give me the birthright. Now, what is the birthright? So in that time, the oldest son would receive a larger inheritance than all the other kids. He would usually have a double portion of all the money or the possessions that all the other younger brothers would have. And it was because it was the job of the firstborn to be this head of the family and carry on the family name. So there's the physical birthright, the physical inheritance that Esau would have received. But there's a second part of it too, because if you've been reading in Genesis here so far, you know that what is being passed down to Esau is not just the physical blessing, but the spiritual calling that is on this family to be the Abraham family, to be the light to the nations, to have kids that outnumber the stars in the sky, that this is the family. Not only are they going to be blessed, but through them, all families on the earth are going to be blessed. So there's the physical birthright, and the spiritual birthright, which is the calling on this family. Now, Jacob here, he asks for this birthright shamelessly. To capitalize when somebody is in a moment of need is terrible, but to do that to your own brother when he's down, like, Jacob, man, what is going on here? I read some commentaries this week, and if you remember from last week, Rebecca was told with the twins in her womb, the older will serve the younger. So Rebecca got this word about Jacob when he was in the womb. And some commentators that I read, they're like, this is Jacob righteously pursuing his destiny. And I'm like, get out of here with that. He's exploiting his brother in a moment of weakness. I couldn't do that to anybody, let alone one of my brothers, right? And so Jacob here, he's wicked. He's just trying to exploit his brother. This is what Heel does. If Harry is doing what Harry does, gulping down the red stuff, then Heel is doing what he does. He's looking to trip up somebody else so he can get ahead. And it says here in verse 32, "Look," said Esau, "I'm about to die." How dramatic is this? For a manly man, this is some drama queen energy right here. I'm about to die. What good is a birthright to me? And Jacob said, "Swear to me first." Jacob is ready. Jacob's like, I want a contract, okay? You're not, I remember with my brothers, we would literally sometimes put stuff in writing and put it up on the wall. It's like, you said you do dishes, you're not getting out of it, there it is on the wall, right? And I gave you $5. Like, I want to see it. Swear to me first. Like, I want to see it. I want to hear it. I need a contract. Don't think you're going to weasel your way out of this. Swear to me first. So he swore to Jacob and sold his birthright to him. Then Jacob gave bread and lentil stew to Esau. He ate, drank, got up, and went away. So Esau despised his birthright. So I want you to think about this here. Esau could have been the one who the rest of the Old Testament is the story of the Edomites. And the Israelites would have been these side characters who were always getting in the way of the promise of God. They could have been the ones who went up on Mount Sinai to see God face to face. They could have been the ones who had the presence of God in their midst with a pillar of cloud and fire. The Edomites could have been the family that God used to bless all the nations on the earth. The Messiah could have come from the line of Esau to conquer sin and death. And instead, you know what he got? Lentil soup and bread. He traded all of that. And I love the phrasing here. It says he ate, drank, got up, went away. It's like he gives you 4 verbs in 4 words. He gives you all of it right there. Eat, drink, got up, went away. It's not like, and he sat down for a nice meal with his stew. And he paired it with a nice glass of red wine. And then he savored every bite. It's like he ate, drank, got up, went away. And that's about how long the pleasure of sin lasts. I remember, I grew up in church. Some of you guys did, some of you guys didn't. And this is a story I remember hearing so much as a kid. We hear these stories about the patriarchs, and it was like in VBS, we're making lentil necklaces so we never forget the sin of Esau in our 6-year-old lives, right? You should try growing up in church, man. It's fun. We're putting lentil on paper plates and all of it, right? And I remember hearing this story growing up, knowing all the promises that are going to happen through Jacob, that Yahweh is known as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It could have been Esau. It could have been Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. And I remember hearing these stories growing up. And I remember thinking, no one is actually that dumb. No one is actually that hungry. No one is seriously that stupid to trade the destiny of God, the plan of God, the promise of God for a bowl of red stuff that you can eat and be done with. No one is that dumb. And as I got a little bit older, I lived a little bit of life, realized that I had made sometimes some good and sometimes some bad decisions. And I remember reading this story as an adult. And I remember thinking to myself, that old childhood thought, no one's that dumb. And the Lord held up a mirror to my life. God ever do that to you? Not fun. I'm like, who is that stupid? And the Lord's like, hello? Anybody there? How about every day? Every time you choose sin, self, pride, anger, sex, gossip, drugs, alcohol, all the things that we choose all the time. We trade a moment of pleasure with red soup for the promise that God has for our lives. We learned this week at the men's group that Tony doesn't like Brussels sprouts, right? We learned this while we're talking about food. And here's the thing. Sometimes we treat following Jesus like the spiritual equivalent of Brussels sprouts. It's like, listen, Joey, you're going to be miserable, but it's good for you. So do what Jesus says. This is how we treat holiness. This is how we treat the way of Jesus. It's like it's miserable, it's hard, it's obnoxious, but at least you can lay your head on the pillow at night knowing you did a good thing, even though you're miserable inside. Listen to me. The promise of God is that you and I get to be part of the plan that He has for the world. We get to say that Yahweh is our God. We get to be part of the destiny and the dream and the plans that He has for our lives. And we trade all of it for 5 minutes of happiness. We trade all of it for a bowl of soup that we gulp down that's there one moment, and the next minute we're empty inside. We're hungry again. We're looking for something to satisfy us. And I want you to know the beauty of God, the love of God, the faithfulness of God far outweighs anything that this world has to offer. It really does. That we look at the commands of God We look at them like they're just these burdens. It's just this baggage, and I'll just sacrifice because I guess it's the right thing to do. And I want you to see here, God gives us these standards, these laws, these limits, not because he doesn't want you to have any fun, but because he's trying to separate you from things that don't satisfy at the end of the day. A lot of you have testimonies about drugs and alcohol ruining your life, and Jesus saved you. Some of you have testimonies about sexual sin that destroyed your life, destroyed family. Some of you have testimonies about how you would lie or be angry or gossip and how Jesus changed your life. And I want you to see this here, that the way of God, following Jesus, it's because he's trying to separate you from things that don't ultimately lead to life. Listen, following Jesus, it's not like you have to follow Jesus. We get to follow Jesus. You're telling me I get to be part of your plan for the world? Me? I get to be part of your plan to reach this city. I get to be part of the destiny and the plan and the goal that you have for my family, for my city, for this world. You don't have to. We get to. And listen, it's not always sinful things. Some of you are like, Joey, I don't party. I don't do crazy stuff. And here's the thing about the bowl of soup. A bowl of soup by itself is not a sin. And see, sometimes we trade the calling of God, the plan of God, not because of some wild sin. Sometimes it's because we put work first over our relationship with God. Sometimes it's because we're scrolling too much to have time to pray or read the Bible. And you might say, Joey, scrolling's not a sin. Making money's not a sin. Working hard at a hobby is not a sin. And guess what? A bowl of soup isn't a sin either. But if it keeps you from the destiny of God, get it out of your life. If it keeps you from the plan and the promise that God has for you, you will miss it. Church, listen to me. I'm telling you, Esau gave up letting the entire Old Testament be the story of his family. He gave up receiving the covenants, receiving the promise, the Messiah coming from his family being the one to bless the nations, and he did it for a bowl of soup. And if you hear that and think, well, Esau's nuts, I would never do that, take a look in the mirror. So often in life, the Lord is like, Joey, what are you doing? And some of you, maybe when the Lord talks to you, it's like, you're just perfect. You're killing it. Treat yourself. Go have a night out. The Lord talks to me and he's like, look, you baboon, the red stuff's not that good. It's not that good that we get in this moment that we're like, man, I need this. And I want to tell you, human history, the story of so many people's lives over and over and over again, is a story of people who think that a bowl of soup will make them happy. And I'm telling you, it doesn't last. It doesn't last. C.S. Lewis said this about our desire for happiness, our desire for pleasure. He said, it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered to us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. Do we settle? It's not that we want joy too much. It's not that we want to be happy too much. It's that we don't want it enough. It's that we find these cheap half pleasures that don't really last when infinite joy is being offered to us, Esau. The plan of God, the promise of God, the beauty of God, that we get to come into his presence. And guess what? His mercies are new every morning. And around his throne, there's angels circling around saying, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. And we get to come into that song. We get to come into his presence. The Psalms say that in his presence, there's fullness of joy. And at his right hand, there's pleasures forevermore. This is the one who's seated above the circle of the earth, who reigns over the nations. Heaven is his throne, and earth is his footstool. Isaiah says, have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord, the everlasting God, he neither faints nor gets weary. His thinking is beyond searching. This is the one who's the Ancient of Days, and fire is around his throne, and angels circle around him, and everyone in his temple cries glory, cries holy, and the voice of God is strong. The love of God is strong, and he's got a destiny for you to call us out of darkness, 1 Peter says. The excellencies of the one who calls us out of darkness and into God's marvelous light. And we trade all of that, the beauty of God, the transcendent glory of God. We trade it for a bowl of soup. And I want to tell you right here today, Jesus is better. Make no mistake about it. The destiny of God is better. The problem is our eyes, we're looking down. They're on that bowl of soup right in front of us. We're so short-sighted. And if you can just lift your gaze beyond the moment that you're in, the Bible offers us a better meal, a better bread that really satisfies. What is that meal? Jesus tells us in John 6. He said, I am the bread of life, Jesus told them. No one who comes to me will ever be hungry, and no one who believes in me will ever be thirsty again. Jesus says here in this chapter, he says, my body, it's real food. My blood, it's real drink. And he's not talking literally. He's not saying you got to literally do that. He's saying his life, his life poured out on that cross, poured out for you and me. It's real food. It's real drink that it really satisfies. And I can tell you here, I'm not the most disciplined person in this room. I'm not the smartest. I'm not the most spiritual. I'm just a guy who found some bread. And I'm telling you, this bread works. This bread satisfies. And if you will eat that bread and drink that cup, you'll never be hungry again. You'll never be thirsty again. There's an old hymn that says, take the world, but give me Jesus. You can have it all. You can have all the bread and lentil stew you want, but I'm holding on to that promise. And Esau here, he says, what's the point of a birthright if I'm dead? And I want to tell you, it's better to die with the blessing of God on your life than to live without it. David said, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 days anywhere else. Better to be a doorkeeper in God's house than to live in the palaces of this world. And you see, so many times we just treat holiness like it's this thing that we have to do. And I want to tell you, is it hard? Sure. Is there sacrifices? Sure. When you're staring at that lentil stew, absolutely. It's hard. It's uncomfortable. You got to say no. But lift your eyes to the promise. Lift your eyes to the call of God. And I want to echo what my mom shared earlier. Some of you, you have to know that this moment in your life, this time in your life, it's worth living. That how you've been living is not how your life will always be. It's not how your story will always end. That this is just a moment in time and a new day is coming. A new season is coming. If you could just see the promise, if you could just see the destiny that God has for your life, you'd leave that bowl of soup in a heartbeat. I want to close here with a quote from a guy named Ignatius of Antioch, one of the church fathers. Lived 2 or 3 generations after the apostles. Ignatius is like Kelly. He's pretty much always right. So check him out sometime. Ignatius said, my passion has been crucified, and there's no fire of love for material things in me. I take no pleasure in food of corruption or in the pleasures of this life. I desire the bread of God, which is the flesh of Jesus Christ, who is the seed of David. And for drink I desire his blood, which is imperishable love. So there's nothing left in me for the things of the world. There's nothing left, that everything's been crucified on the cross of Christ. There's no desire for the things of the world. Give me the bread of God, which is Jesus Christ. Give me his blood poured out, which is his love for me. That's what matters. That's what sustains. That's what satisfies. It really does. You can have all the stew. You can have all the stuff of the world. But give me Jesus. Give me his presence. Give me his love. You see, I was fortunate growing up in church. Because in the church that I grew up at, I had real encounters with God. And the thing about that was, once you've encountered him, it kind of ruins you for everything else. I had friends in high school. Joey, why don't you smoke weed with us? And I'm like, first of all, you smell, so let's start there. Second of all, it was like, why aren't you doing these things? And I'm telling you, it's like, I'm not just, well, Joey's just a good person, and he's just, a guy who's too good for us, and he's really ethical, and Joey's really moral. And I'm like, no, I found something better. I found better bread. I found better drink, and it satisfies. And some of you, I pray that you get ruined for everything else this world has to offer. You get ruined that you have an encounter with God, and you try to go back to this stuff in the world, and you're like, man, this is terrible. You gulp it down, then you're miserable again. I pray God ruins you with his presence. I pray he ruins you with his love.